Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome to Against the Spread, episode 2. He is Amal Shah. I'm Scott Spreitzer. We are Against the Spread with Spreitzer and the Shaw, and we're going to be talking about a bunch of games today, a handful of marquee matchups in college football. We're also going to talk about the midweek movers in the NFL. We'll get to our best bets at the end of the show. All that good stuff. Amal, I hope you've had a good week of football and come into this show with a good week of baseball. I'm very pleased because I kicked off Wednesday with a win in La Liga action in Spain with Betis. So I'm happy as we're starting the show right now this afternoon.
Oh, it's good to hear. I thought you might have been on the Betis Getafe game today. Betis winning that one 2-0, 2-1, excuse me. Getafe with a late goal in that one. So didn't know which side you were on. Some good Champions League action as well.
Yeah, definitely. Anyway, we're going to jump into K-State and BYU to kick things off. We're going to talk about Tennessee, Oklahoma, Utah, Oklahoma State. You get the picture. A lot of big games going on this weekend as opposed to what it was last week. And we'll get to all that. First, a quick note, that banner across the top of your screen, if you're new to this show, new to DocSports.com in general, it says get a free $60 account. It means just that. If you're not yet a member, you click on the link below the video, get yourself set up for that free $60 account, and then you can use those free $60 on any of Amal's daily packages or any of mine. Doesn't matter if it's football or baseball or soccer. You can use it in any sport that you wish. So anyway, let's get to it, Amal. Let's talk a little Big 12 football with Kansas State at BYU. Game time 10:30 p.m. Eastern on Saturday night. This line was a little bit higher than this. Sevens, there were some 7.5s out there. K-State, the road chalk. Right now, just about every shop that I have on my line service, I got about 18 to 20 books up in front of me, and every one of them is sitting at 6.5 with that total at 48.5. I'll kick it to you this way. We know what Kansas State is going to do. They run first, 74 carries, 46 pass attempts against Tulane and Arizona combined. I don't care about the opener against Tennessee Martin, so I don't factor that into that
Yeah.
equation. But quarterback Avery Johnson, man, he makes good decisions when he drops back. He knows when to run. He's been especially tough with his legs. And then you got the running back Giddens, one of the best backs in the nation, Amal.
I think Giddens is underrated. I love him. You know, everyone talks about Ollie Gordon at Oklahoma State, and rightfully so. But I think Giddens, he's right there in that conversation for me. I completely agree with you. You mentioned Avery Johnson. He's done a tremendous job so far for this team. Really put them in the right situations. We've seen them be dominant. He's completing about 64% of his passes. But as you alluded to, he doesn't make the mistakes. That's the biggest thing you want out of a young quarterback. And then he's got the mobility to scramble, puts pressure on the defense. This team is not going to overwhelm you in the passing game, but it's the running game. You mentioned Giddens. He's outstanding, 324 yards so far on the season. Love this team defensively. But with all that being said, Scott, I like BYU in this game, and the reason is the number's high. You're playing at altitude in Provo. Historically, they've been a very good football team at home. They've played a better offense, or at least one in theory coming into the season you thought was going to be better in SMU. They absolutely shut down the Ponies on the hilltop in Dallas. We saw Preston Stone struggle in that game. Jake Retzlaff has done a really nice job. One of the things that I always love about the Cougars, they're an older team. You got guys in their early 20s. They have the experience. They don't make dumb mistakes. They don't make dumb penalties. I think Kansas State probably wins the football game. I think K-State's the second best team in the Big 12. But I think the Cougars hang around, and they've got a shot. You know, we talked about it last week. If you like a team, and if you're catching this type of number, play the money line. There's a great chance. We saw it in the NFL. Monday night, Atlanta wins in the money line. We saw it in the NFL with three other teams as 6+ point dogs winning outright. So if you like BYU, this is an opportunity to go with the money line as well.
The thing that scares me about this, and I get it, like when it was 7.5, I was thinking, okay, that seems like a lot of points. I just worry about BYU's offense. If you take away that opener against, outmanned Southern Utah, you look at
Yeah.
quarterback Jake Retzlaff. He's got 4 touchdown passes and 3 picks in his last 2 games, 3 interceptions, 58% completion rate. And one of those 2 games came against a bad Wyoming team. And I look at Retzlaff, I'm like, okay, he's their leading rusher right now, 113 yards, little more than 4.5 yards per carry. They have 3 running backs with a combined 252 yards on the ground, 84 yards per game on about 4.5 yards per pop. And again, those last 2 games, even including the first game, you're talking about Southern Utah, you're talking about Wyoming. That concerns me a little bit. So I know right now, or at least so far this week, we've seen BYU as the sharp side in this one. I lean the other way. This is going to be one of those few times, I guess, when you and I are maybe going against each other a little bit. It's not going to be a service play for me or a premium play, but I lean K State at less than 7 in this one. Next up is Tennessee at Oklahoma, and you got the Volunteers laying 7 in Norman, the total 57.5. Amal, I mean, it's funny because I was looking at this before the season began and thinking, boy, it's not going to be easy on the Sooners this year going to the SEC. For those folks who have been following it casually, college football, check out this Oklahoma schedule. You got home, of course, this week against the Volunteers, at Auburn, the Texas game on a neutral site, home against South Carolina, who's been playing a decent brand of football this year, at Ole Miss. Ole Miss could play for the national title at the end of the
Yep.
year. They get Maine. Okay, Maine's a win. Then right back at it, at Missouri, home Alabama, at LSU. My gosh, this game is an important game to the kids from Norman.
I tell you what, if everything breaks perfectly, I think the Sooners are probably at best 6-6, maybe 7-5. But realistically, Scott, they could be looking at a potential 5-7 year. The schedule is daunting, and the biggest problem is they don't have the consistency on the offensive line. They can't run the ball. That's where I have a major concern right now when I look at Oklahoma. The ineptitude of the offensive line. The second half, they struggled. I know they covered. They beat me. I had Tulane last week. I tell you what, Scott, I was feeling pretty good, down 5 with about 7-8 minutes to go. I'm thinking, how are they going to get to 14 here and cover against me? And unfortunately, they found a way. But with that being said, I think it's a tough matchup. The way Tennessee's offense operates, the speed at which they perform, I think it's going to be a real challenge. On the flip side, I'm not sure where Tennessee's defense is, but I'm not concerned because I don't think Oklahoma's good enough. I think, when you look at Arnold, the quarterback at OU, he's going to eventually be very good, but it's not right now, especially with a lot of pressure with this offensive line. Farouk is out. He's a deep threat. That's a blow to this offense as well. To me, I like Tennessee, and I'm not a fan of laying road points, but I would lay it with Tennessee here. I just think this is an opportunity to make a statement win if you're Tennessee. We've seen some movement in the top 5, 6 of the college football polls. I think with a win here, a dominant win, Tennessee could leapfrog some other teams along the way.
Yeah, we're back in agreement here. I looked at Oklahoma. I watched them against Temple. Temple's just a terrible team. They blew them out. So you got to throw that out of the mix. They were outgained by about 70 yards by Houston and barely won 16-12. And we're talking about a Houston team that's 113th in total yards per game and a team that got blown out by 20 on their home field against UNLV. Oklahoma, 28 carries, 78 yards. And when you take Jackson Arnold's rushing numbers out of the way, they were 17 carries for 50 yards, a yard under 3 yards per carry. That's scary. And that comes against Houston, Tulane, Temple. You can make the argument that this is Tennessee's first test, no doubt about it. I mean, they played Kent, Chattanooga, and a so-so NC State team thus far. But the bottom line, and again, I know it was like 10-3, less than 4 minutes to go in the first half last week, and NC State was driving, and Tennessee made it happen. 85-yard pick six. They had 2 of them in the game and got the job done. I know it is the first, road game, the first road test for the young freshman quarterback for Tennessee, but I don't like this Oklahoma offensive line. 112th in sacks, and again, they have faced no real test as of yet, as far as I'm concerned. So Tennessee, by the way, favorite versus ranked opponents. They've won 11 of their last 12, 9-3 against the spread. The average win is 37-21, and the average closing spread has been 6.5, which is basically where this number is. So I'm with you. I think Tennessee goes on to the victory over Oklahoma and gets the cover along the way. Next up, we're going to stay in the state of Oklahoma. It is off to Stillwater. Utah's laying 2 points, total 54 against Oklahoma State. All this one's been interesting because Utah opened 2, or at least they were last week. Then it went to Oklahoma State 2 because of the Cam Rising injury. It's since been announced that Cam Rising is going to play, so Utah is again a 2-point favorite. Again, that total sitting at 54. I'll throw it to you like this. I mean, listen, I know it's tough to go against a Kyle Whittingham coach team, but Cam Rising's only 5-4 as a starter on the road with the Utah Utes.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's one element that's been the kryptonite for Cam Rising in Utah is their inability to win games on the road. You look at this Oklahoma State team, they come into this game averaging almost 43 points a game. Yeah, they've had some weak opponents there, but they put up at least 39 in every game. I like where the offense is going. Ollie Gordon's a tough running back to slow down. One of the premier backs. We talked about that earlier when we mentioned Giddens of Kansas State. But I got to tell you, Scott, this is the opportunity if you are Utah to make the kind of run for the Big 12 title. You win this game, you're going to be I don't want to say prohibitive, but you're going to be a decent favorite in every game the rest of the way. The schedule's amazing. They don't play K-State. Not only they got a chance to win the Big 12 title, but they're going to make the college football playoff in my estimation. I'm a little concerned because Rising did miss the last game. Who's it? Isaac Wilson, I think, is the backup, right?
Right.
He's done a decent job for them, but you need Cam Rising's experience. They're going to need this running game to show up. If they have the running game, I think they have an opportunity here to be able to win this football game. If they don't, it's a serious concern from a Utah standpoint. Micah Bernard's going to have to play well, and then Rising's going to have to pick his spots and do what he does when necessary, and then pick up a couple of first downs with his legs as well. And then on the flip side, Alan Bowman's got to protect the football. If he turns it over, if he's a little bit careless, this is a physical Utah team. And I think the game plan for Whittingham is take away Ollie Gordon, let Alan Bowman beat us. And if he does, you take your chances with Presley on the perimeter. If not, you say, you know what? You're not going to beat us at being more physical than us.
I think I might have mentioned Southern Utah is playing BYU earlier. BYU played SIU. Southern Utah was actually the opener for the Utah Utes, and I kind of tossed that one aside. But, you talked about Micah Bernard. I mean, he's been tearing it up on the ground behind a solid run blocking O-line. And one thing about Oklahoma State is that they've been weak on defense, including allowing about 157 yards rushing per game on a good solid 4.5 yards per carry. They're going to want to shore that up in this game facing Michael Bernard. And I look at what Ollie Gordon has done. I mean, he might be the most talented running back in college football this year, one of the best. He's only picking him up and putting him down all right now for 3.5 yards per carry. I mean, believe it or not, Oak State is 112th in rushing yards per game, 61 carries, 188 yards, 3 yards per carry the last 2 weeks. The funny thing is that if they can get Ollie Gordon in the end zone rushing the football, they're 12-0 when he rushes for a touchdown. A couple of notes on this. Utah, they have had 6 big time or big game true road trips the last 2 years. They've only won one of those 6 games. And as far as Oklahoma State is concerned, they're 5-0 against the spread the last 5 years as a home pup. They've won 7 straight home games against ranked teams. I'm going to lean to Oklahoma State in this contest. USC's at Michigan. We got a quarterback change this week for the Michigan Wolverines. That offense has been stagnant so far. I really don't think Moore, the head coach, is going to be here 3 years from now. I think he gets 3 seasons, and he's probably going to be gone. I don't see Michigan being a player this year, obviously, maybe even next year or the year after. I don't like the offensive coaching. And again, it's not all his fault. The quarterback cupboard is bare. So I'm all they're going to go with Alex Orji this week. He's going to take over the starting nod. Davis Warren, was terrible against Arkansas State, threw 3 interceptions. They only won that game by 10, even though it was never in doubt. But here's the thing about Orji. They're going to run the football a lot. He's thrown 6 passes, 3 completions, 15 yards. He's going to go up against a USC defense that is night and day better than it was a year ago. Exciting, electric quarterback in Miller Moss, who's played well thus far. And one thing that worries me, because I really thought Michigan run the football, which they'll do with the new quarterback. They're going to run all day long with the occasional pass. But Michigan's defense is extremely talented, yet they're getting no pressure right now, Amal. And that worries me a little bit in this game.
Well, it definitely should. I like Miller Moss. He's got the capability of picking them apart. One criticism of USC offensively that I have so far is the kid out of Vegas, which is Zachariah Branch, played at Bishop Gorman. He doesn't get enough touches. Listen, he might not be Peter Warwick or Percy Harvin, but he's got that type of ability in terms of quickness and speed. And I don't think they're utilizing him enough. On the defensive side of the ball, Lynn, who came over from UCLA, Scott, to me, I think he's going to be able to slow down this team. You look at Khalil Mullings. He's been the better running back. Him and Donovan Edwards both have 36 carries, but Edwards has 150 yards on that 36 carries. Mullings has 270. Why is Donovan Edwards getting touches? If you look at Edwards' career historically, he's had 2 great games. He had big runs against Ohio State, and he had a big game against Washington. The guy has been non-existent everywhere else. Yes, I get he's averaging 4.2, but against Fresno, 11 carries for 27 yards. Lynn is going to tell Orji to beat him through the air. I'm telling you, he's such a good coach defensively. He's going to take away the Michigan ground game. I'm not going to play the points here, but I love SC to win the game. I'm a little bit scared because I think Michigan defensively can slow down USC. I don't think USC is as good as Texas is offensively to be able to do what they did to Michigan. But to me, Scott, this is a game where if you're Michigan, you play towards the under. It's 44.5. If it gets into a high-scoring game, you're in trouble. You take your time, you run the football, you're going to take the play clock down. I'm going to play the under on this game. I still believe the Trojans win, but I'm a little bit concerned about the number. And I'm generally not a person who gets scared in those spots, but it's on the road. USC playing at Michigan will be still a big game with the marquee programs there involved. But for me, Mullings has to get more touches than Donovan Edwards. Donovan Edwards' stock is dropping like a rock.
I agree with that 100% across the board. I think this is, of all the big games this week, this is the toughest handicap. I think the best thing that could happen to Michigan is they do start, going to Alex Orji and they do run the football. I mean, we've heard, rumors of triple option being out there this week for the Michigan Wolverines. They just don't have a passing game right now. It's still at the big house. USC's got to prove that they can go to a true road environment like this and win a football game, and not only do so, but now you're talking about having to win by more than a touchdown. I'm not going to suggest that people play the money line here, but I'll just say this. If you said you got to pick a side, I would say USC outright. I'm with you, though. I can't lay the points in this game. I'm just going to kick back, watch, take some notes. I want to see, if Michigan does run some different things at the USC defense than we've seen thus far with the quarterback change. If they do play some option football, I want to just see how USC reacts defensively throughout the course of this game and adjustments that may have to be made. Because if you look at the game film with Davis Warren, and I know Orji's played a little bit, but if you look at that game film with Warren, you might as well just wipe that off the slate, throw it in the trash, because it ain't going to be the same game film or the same type of play that we're going to see out of this offense with that quarterback change. There's our thoughts on college football marquee matchups. Of course, you can find all of Amal's plays and all of my premium plays over at DocSports.com on our personal handicapping pages over there each and every day of the week, not just football, daily baseball, soccer, what have you. WNBA playoffs starting real soon. And the cool thing about it is, if you're not yet a member at DocSports.com and just want to give it a trial run, click on the link below the video. Get yourself set up for that free $60 account. You can use those free $60 on any of Amal's daily packages and also any of mine. Let's talk about some midweek moves in the NFL. There's some crazy numbers out there in the NFL, Amal, so far through the first 2 weeks. And one that popped out to me was, of course, underdogs, and it doesn't fit this game, but underdogs of more than 6 are 8-0 against the spread the first couple of weeks of the NFL season. We haven't seen that in a long, long time. And it's a situation where just odd things are happening. Passing touchdowns, I think at a 66 so far through the first 2 weeks. 2 years ago, it was 110. 3 years ago, 115. We're just seeing a change right now. And I know part of this passing situation has to do with young quarterbacks, with the rookies who have yet to throw a touchdown in all those passes. They've thrown like 180 of them through the first couple of weeks. It's been a tough road to hoe for the rookies. We don't have rookies here. We got 2 quarterbacks who are playing excellent football right now. C.J. Stroud for Houston. Sam Darnold's in the right place at the right time with the right coaching and doing extremely well with Minnesota. This line, Amal, opened Houston 4. It's all the way down to 1.5 with a total of 46.
Yeah, it tells me a couple things. Expect Justin Jefferson to be in the lineup there for the Minnesota Vikings. That's a huge difference maker. Look, for me, I get if you have Tyreek Hill or Devontae Adams or anybody else at the top of the heap. But for me, JJ is the best receiver, and there's some separation. I think he's that good. It's for me, it's like what DeAndre Hopkins was a few years ago. He makes a difference for Sam Darnold. We saw the game flip on a 97-yard touchdown against the Niners. He gives Darnold the comfort zone. And then I love Kevin O'Connell as a head coach. He understands quarterbacks. His disposition, his personality seems to exude confidence to his players. And when I look at him, it has been instilled in Sam Darnold. Look, Sam Darnold's a good passer. Here's where I have a knock on Sam Darnold. When he came out of USC and his same problem in the NFL, the turnovers. And it's not just INTs, it's fumbles from time to time. Reminds me a little bit of Dave Craig with the fumble issue as a quarterback. If he can curtail that, I like the running game with Jones and Chandler. They're effective. This is a pretty good team. They're pretty dangerous. I'm not surprised this number has come down to where it is. I thought the number opened up a little bit too big for the Texans to be a 4-point road favorite. With that being said, Houston's defense so far this year has surprised me. You know, I know Anthony Richardson had those 2 big bombs, and then we saw him fall flat in Green Bay, so give him credit for that first game. But the Texans delivered. They stymied the Bears. They got after it with 7 sacks in that game. I think this team's going to put some pressure on Darnold. If Minnesota can avoid a red zone turnover on offense or in their own red zone a turnover or in that range from Sam Darnold, they've got a great shot to win this game. Scott, I don't have a play on this game, But I think this is going to be a fun watch, and I'll try and in-game it. And I apologize just simply because I think the number's right where it should be. It's tough for me to pick a side.
No, I get it. If you don't like a side, and I do that a lot. If I don't like a side, but I have a feeling about a game, and I like to see how it's going in that first quarter, and maybe make an in-game play as you get a feel of what's happening in the game. The one thing about Houston this year that they got to shore up is they've been weak in the red zone, so they got to find that ground game, a little more tight end usage when they get inside the opponent's 20. I look at Minnesota's defense; they're giving nobody time to throw. And at the same time, I don't think the Houston defense is going to give Sam Darnold the kind of time he's had over the past couple of weeks. So when it comes down to both defenses being able to pressure the opposing quarterback, I'm just going to take CJ Stroud over Sam Darnold in this kind of a situation. I like Houston a little bit, laying the point and a half. CJ Stroud is, I mean, my gosh, from the moment he stepped on the field in the NFL, this guy is like way beyond his years. People said last year, well, the first few games, maybe he's playing above his head, over his skis. I'm like, I don't know, man. This guy looks like he's got it between the ears and physically, Amal.
I couldn't agree with you more. I'll tell you one thing that I really like, why I like your reasoning on this play with Stroud is sometimes don't overanalyze it. When Kansas City's playing, Patrick Mahomes is the difference. And if you look back to the game Sunday night, I would argue CJ Stroud had his worst half of football since the first game of his career against Baltimore. Outside of the throw to Tank Dell that Dell should have had and it would have been a touchdown on third down, Stroud didn't play great. And I'm going to tell you, that's a scary proposition if you're Minnesota, because this is a guy, if you look at during his rookie year, the throws, he might want to have one or two errant throws a game. And I'm not talking about ones that are going to be intercepted. One that might be to the left or the right of a receiver, but they still make a play on the ball. This guy in a controlled environment, in a dome at US Bank, I'm telling you right now, he was not happy with his performance last week. I always watch his press conferences every week. This guy's going to put on a show.
Yeah, I agree. Eagles and Saints. This game happens to be a premium play for me, so I'll set it up for you if you want to talk about this one. Saints laying 2.5, 49.5 the total. They've been as much the Saints as 3 in some shops this week. No A.J. Brown for the Eagles, at least midweek. He's listed as out again with that hamstring injury, and Philly could do nothing deep without him in the loss to Atlanta. They'll make their adjustments and see if they can get it done that way. And I know Nick Sirianni deserves a lot of heat. At the same time, Saquon Barkley, and make that open catch. And we're talking about a Philly team that's 2-0 right now and a couple of undefeated teams rather than Philly losing that game the other night. This Saints line has moved 6 points, as much as 6.5 in some shops since before last week's games and going back a couple of weeks. It's not like Jalen Hurts is injured. They, again, don't have A.J. Brown for this one. But, boy, New Orleans putting up over 40 in back-to-back games, blowout wins, surprised me both weeks. I will say this. The first thing I did was and I'm sure other people thought about this if I did, I jumped onto the database. I typed in what happens to an NFL team in week 3 or in any week after scoring more than 40 points in 2 weeks in a row, and won both games and covered both games. And guess what? It's basically 50-50. Had to toss it out. It's like 39-41 with some pushes. So I thought, all right, that has nothing to do with this handicap. And I went on to handicap it from a normal standpoint after that. But again, this one's a premium play. What's your thoughts on this one?
First of all, you mentioned the A.J. Brown injury, and that's the bad news for Philadelphia. On the flip side, New Orleans is going to get some good news. They're going to get Marshawn Lattimore back. He missed the Cowboys game with a hamstring issue. He practiced on Wednesday, so he's a guy that's going to be back in the mix. I expect to see him on Devontae Smith quite a bit. This Philly team needs to have consistency in the running game. We saw it in week 1. Saquon Barkley was outstanding. But I'm going to tell you, Jordan Davis, he's not wreaking enough havoc on the defensive line. He's not getting pressure on the quarterbacks. They're not getting to them. You look at the way they played against Kirk Cousins. I mean, this guy could have ordered lunch and dinner back there at times. There was too much time. I love the way Derek Carr is playing. I always thought Derek Carr is a very good quarterback. He's not elite, but when given time, he plays like he's elite. In the dome, the confidence is very high. The demise of Alvin Kamara was much overrated. He was outstanding against the Cowboys. I think the Saints, I'm not going to say it's the old Dome Patrol days, but this is a team that's going to be tough in this spot.
It's funny about them. You brought up Derek Carr. Going into this season, it wasn't a question. It's never been a question of Derek Carr having the talent or the arm to get the job done. We talked about this last week. We brought up a couple of quarterbacks from the past by example, as far as landing in the right place with the right coaching. And that's obviously what's happening with Derek Carr now. which is kind of funny because I kind of thought this New Orleans coaching staff might be out the door by week 10 or 11 if they played anywhere like they did last year. A lot of football remains to be played, and we'll see if this offense can keep churning. The surprise to me has been what you just mentioned, Alvin Kamara, because he looked like he was at the downslope of his career the last couple of years. A bunch of injuries, obviously, bunch of bumps and bruises. Boy, he's playing like he used to right now for New Orleans. And give Derek Carr the credit where it's due. He's finally on a team with decent coaching. Listen, the Raiders haven't had a good head coach since John Gruden was there. The last couple, I'm not an Antonio Pierce fan. I get it. They won last week. They beat Baltimore, but he's not long for employment, I think, in Las Vegas as a head coach. I'll just go on record saying that. But anyway, yeah, I mean, the biggest surprise to me is that Kamara is playing like he did a few years ago when he hadn't, succumbed to a bunch of bumps and bruises. And we'll see if they keep it going against Philly this week. Packers at the Titans. Titans were 3. They're now 1.5. The total 36.5. Now on Wednesday afternoon, Amal, I see the little ribbon going across my screen from my line service saying that Jordan Love has been upgraded to questionable. Listen, they designed a great game plan last week. That was my best bet here on the show. Green Bay. I know you had them too on the show, but
Yep.
Green Bay, and then also had Sprinkle a little on the money line, and they got the job done. I thought this coaching staff, LaFleur, would do a great job as far as having Malik Willis operate without having to make huge, big plays, no more than 2 or 3 throughout the course of the game. Great defense for the most part, and Malik Willis didn't make mistakes because he wasn't pressured to have to make big plays throughout the game, 3, 4, 5 times. I don't know, man. If I'm going on the road, I've got an off to a good start, and I've got a situation where I got some division games coming up, got a division we can win if I'm thinking as a Green Bay Packer. I don't think I want to put Jordan Love out there. I just get a feeling he's not going to be out there. This is almost like a little chess move here. He's questionable, but they'll still go with Malik Willis. Your thoughts on this one?
I completely agree with you. You have to think big picture if you're Green Bay. Don't expect to see Jordan Love in the lineup, but I think it is the smart move to suggest or imply that he is going to play. It may change the way they prepare for the game, and he obviously presents so many more challenges than Malik Willis. On the flip side, Scott, to me, when I look at this game, I understand the line move sitting at 3 in favor of Tennessee simply because Malik Willis is the quarterback for the Green Bay Packers. There's a serious concern there. But you got to give LaFleur and them credit. 12 for 14 passing last week. 120 yards. I get the yardage may not overwhelm people, but 10 yards per completion is pretty good. And then on the flip side, I thought the defense played well. Anthony Richardson presents some challenges and some problems because of his athleticism. But I'm going to tell you, Scott, the bigger concern I have with Tennessee and why I can't back them. When I look at Will Levis, this guy just doesn't get it. The wiring is not correct upstairs. I'm going to tell you right now, the turnovers this guy makes. I had a friend of mine who's a Bears fan send me a text when he threw the pick 6 in Chicago. He goes, "This is the worst interception I've seen in the last 5 years." And then he tries to go bowling and pick up a 7-10 split against the Jets on lateraling the football, and it turns it over. They were up 7-0 at that point. Mid-second quarter could have gone up 10-0. And I love the reaction. What are you doing? And he's absolutely right in terms of who's the Tennessee head coach? Callahan?
I'm spacing it out. Yeah.
I think so. Anyway, I'm drawing a blank there. But the point is, Will Levis, to me, he's got talent, but he just doesn't have it between the ears. I'm telling you, I watched this kid play at Penn State. I watched him play at Kentucky. I thought the closest he'd come to working in the NFL would be as a security guard. No way did I ever think he'd be a starting quarterback in this league. To me, at 3, I like the Packers here. They'll play defense. They'll rely on the special teams, punting and field goals, and then allow Willis to make some short intermediate plays. I like Green Bay here.
Yeah, it's funny with Tennessee because I was watching Levis after he turned the ball over and he goes to the sideline. And of course, it's been all over the place, YouTube and what have you, over the last few days. He didn't get coached up. He didn't get like a lesson from his coaching staff and his head coach. What he got was a lambasting, like, dude, you suck. What the hell? It was like yelling. I mean, there was a problem there when it came to the relationship between coach and quarterback. I don't know if you get over that in a few days. Levis had the NFL debut last year, which was like through the roof. He looked like CJ Stroud at his best. And since then, I think they're 1-8 or something like that since that first start. And he has not looked good at all. I'm going to go, I know the total's low, 36.5. I'm going to assume that Malik Willis is going to play. He only threw 14 passes last week. He did complete 12 of those, a lot of safe stuff. They ran the ball 53 times. I look at Tennessee, they outgained the Jets. They held them to 265 yards. They lose by 7. They're up 7-0, as you mentioned. They're going in to make it 14-0, and then the turnovers. They lost to Chicago 24-17 without allowing an offensive touchdown and blowing a 17-point lead. So they held the Jets to 265. They held Chicago to 148, but the turnovers have done them in. They've given up just 3.8 yards per play. But the problem is, again, as you mentioned, the offense under the direction of Will Levis. So assuming that it's going to be Malik Willis and Will Levis, I think LaFleur comes out with another safe game plan. They're going to be thinking we can win this game if we don't make dumb mistakes, because the other side is probably going to make dumb mistakes. So I'm with you as far as staying away from Tennessee, but I do like the under in this game. Final game we're going to talk about is the Dolphins and the Seahawks. Then we'll jump into best bets. We'll also find out what Amal's doing this weekend, and I'll let you know what I've got going this weekend. But Seattle opened a 6.5-point home favorite against Miami. It's down 2 points. No Tua, of course, for Miami. Skylar Thompson gets the start. And like we saw with Green Bay and Malik Willis last week, Amal, I'd suspect Mike McDaniel and offensive coordinator Frank Smith dialed down the amount of risky plays with Skylar Thompson on the field, even though he has NFL starting experience.
Yeah, absolutely right. That's the prudent move if you are the Miami Dolphins. You still have some elite talent around you. You got to take advantage of it. Now, they've been hampered with injuries in the backfield with Mozart and, of course, A-Chain being out. That's really hurt this team. But for me, when I look at Skylar Thompson, look, I don't think he's as bad as some of the other backups that you look at around the league. He's not Tua, but I think he's going to put them in a pretty good position. And McDaniels does a nice job of trying to formulate his team to what the strengths are. And that's going to be the key. Now, the one knock I do have on the Dolphins, and I'm not as high on them as other people were coming into the season. Last year, they had won 10 out of 11 games against teams over 500, and they had one win against the Cowboys and were 1-6 out of 7 games against teams over 500. I think Seattle's that middle of the pack team where this is one where it could stay close and be competitive. It's a little bit of a high number. Seattle's the type of team, to me, I like them catching points, Scott. I don't like laying points with them. I know they got the win against Denver, but that was Bo Nix's first start. Thompson's not going to be in that situation where he's worried about making it a start. So I like Miami here getting the points sitting at 4.5.
Yeah, I can't go against you there. I also kind of like the under here because I look at Skylar Thompson and what he's done in the NFL: 68 of 119, 57%, 1 touchdown, 3 picks. And he's not a run threat, really, and the offensive line banged up. So I think what you're going to get here is a lower scoring game between these two, because I do think he's been called an offensive genius, Mike McDaniel. Frank Smith has received a lot of praise as OC, but I think it's time that they got to dial things down a little bit. You can't forget about a speedster like Tyreek Hill or the talent they have around them at the skilled positions, but at the same time, I don't think you want to put Skylar Thompson in a situation where he's going to cost them with a big mistake. So total's 41.5, like it under a little bit. Won't be a premium play, but that's where I'm going there. Best bets in just a moment, but Amal, before we do that, let everybody know what you got going over at DocSports.com for the upcoming weekend.
Yeah, I got a play coming up on a game that might fly under the radar simply because of the spread. But NC State and Clemson should be an interesting one. Clemson a 20.5-point favorite there. And then Scott, gonna revisit the desert this week in an interesting matchup between Detroit, who's on the road against the against the Cardinals. Cardinals coming off a great win, but Detroit really, I'll tell you what, Scott, I can't remember the last time where you could sit there and point to coaching costing a team a win. So there's something interesting and something to look forward to in that one between Detroit and Arizona.
Do you ever get worried? I mean, by the way, I'm involved in that game too with my premium plays. Do you ever get worried about the rest of their season when it comes to Campbell and he gets a little bit emotional? We saw it again last week, which bothered me a little bit about the emotion, kind of like maybe 40% of the play call was emotion and 60% was because of what he should have been doing with X's and O's. That's my only complaint about Detroit. And by the way, I'm on Ross St. Brown. Wasn't as bad as some people thought it was going to be, the injury, and he's expected to play this week. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on Campbell, like moving forward, not particularly this week, but for the rest of the season?
You know, Scott, I'm going to give you a little bit of a gambling analogy. And I love Dan Campbell's personality. I think he's a great guy. I think players love him. But to me, the one thing I'll tell you, when you look back to that playoff game, and I actually just went through the play-by-play with a friend of mine who's a 49er fan about a week ago in that NFC Championship game. Niners get 3 points out of the gate to cut the lead 17-14. Campbell's got an opportunity to put up 3 points to go back up 17, and they would have shaved 9 minutes off the game clock. Now San Francisco is in a situation where they're down 17 points with 21 minutes remaining. Instead, they opt to go for it. And I understand that's been their MO all the time. But it's like Archie Karras. If people that don't know who Archie Karras is, look him up. It's one thing when you don't have any money and you take certain risks. It's easier for a guy who's got $1,000, that's all he's got to his name, to put it all on one game than a guy who's got maybe $5 million in theory to gamble all of it and go bust. And, Archie Karras at one point had a net worth of $40 million and he squandered that away. And it's the same thing. Dan Campbell has it in hand, but you can't, when you have the Super Bowl on the line, you don't take the same approach as you do in week 2 or week 3. And you've got to be much more cautious, and you've got to read the tea leaves in terms of what the situation calls for. I'm telling you, he didn't get called out enough for it, in my estimation. That was the difference between the Detroit Lions, in my opinion, of making the Super Bowl and not. And here's, not to belabor it, but if they make the field goal, they go up 17. Scott, now if you're San Francisco, you're looking at maximum 4 possessions in the game probably. You've got to score virtually 75% of the time you have the ball, if not 100%, assuming you'd shut down Detroit. So you've got to adjust to what the situation calls for. You've got the heavyweight champ in the 8th round on the ropes, and now all of a sudden you back away? Come on, give me a break.
I think the fact that you got to adjust to the situation, something I say all the time, and I'm glad to hear you say it. I mean, we didn't talk about this a lot on the 7 Years of Eason shows we did together on Wednesday afternoons, but we did some from time to time and normally agreed. And it's a situational spot. I mean, McDaniel last week, watching him in the game, Tua got injured. Before he got injured, I'm sitting there watching the contest I had a free video on Buffalo. I didn't actually have a premium play. So of course I'm rooting for the Bills to win. So here's a guy who's rooting for the Bills. I've released it on a video over at DocSports.com. And yet I'm pulling my hair out, what's left of it, because I'm like, what is McDaniel? Get your nose out from behind the laminated playbook, whatever you want to call it. Get it out of there and watch what's going on the field. Sometimes, that pull your guard to the left when the defensive tackle is thinking right isn't the way to go, depending on the situation. It was so by the book that it drove me crazy. And yet I wanted him to lose because I had the other side of the video. But I agree with you. It's a lot of situational that has to come into it. Not just like I give a lot of I guess you want to say credit or pats on the back to football coaches, baseball managers who do utilize a lot of metrics. But sometimes you got to sit back and you got to see what's going on in the game. Every once in a while, a sack bunt is not a bad idea, even though it says, 0.0025% more of a chance of scoring from first if you swing away. Sometimes that sack bunt is a good idea depending on the spot. So I just got long-winded, went on, but I agree with you on that point you made that sometimes you got to pay more attention to the situation than you do the metrics. Sometimes you just have to. This week on my card, I'm all over at DocSports.com on my homepage. I kick things off with college football, of course, and I've got a 7-star in this Saturday's college football. We've had back-to-back profitable Saturdays, including 2-0 in September with my top-rated college football plays. Last week it was Indiana over UCLA, and I was watching that crowd a little bit at the Rose Bowl, and there might have been, 35,000 people, of which 25,000 had to be Indiana fans. Such a shame what's going on at Pasadena right now. But we're going to rack it up and do it again. Hopefully have another winning Saturday and hopefully get on board and get on track in the NFL, because I lost last week and the NFL has been on to me. I've caught no breaks. When you have Tennessee and you're up 17-0 and the spread says you're 61-1, going into a fourth quarter when you've had a 17-point lead with an underdog at any time of the game and you lose, that's kind of how we started things off a couple of weeks ago. But anyway, that's what's going on for me. Amal, let's get to your best bet, and then I'll give you mine.
Yeah, I'm going to give you a free play in the NFL, and it's for the Thursday night game. Like the under in the Patriots-Jets game, sitting at 39.5. Scott, New England's got a very good defense. They're effective. They're not elite, but they're good. And I'll tell you, they're going to run the ball. I love Ramondre Stevenson. I think he's criminally underrated. Jacoby Brissett doesn't make mistakes. He's not going to beat you deep down the field. They're going to play a slow, kind of methodical game like they did in Cincinnati. It was a little bit higher scoring against Seattle, but I think that'll kind of revert back to the norm of what we saw against the Bengals. And the flip side, I don't know where you come out, but look, Aaron Rodgers throws a temper tantrum anytime a receiver makes a mistake. I just don't think it's a good look. But he hasn't shown me that he's Aaron Rodgers and what we saw in Green Bay.
Right.
I have not been impressed the first 2 weeks with Aaron Rodgers. Jets have a great defense. They've got a great combination between Brees Hall and Braylon Allen. But the passing game has not really been there the way I think maybe people anticipated coming into the season.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, we'll find out if the NFL is going to get back to its norm because right now, and the New York Jets are laying 6.5. NFL dogs, as I mentioned at the top of the show, of 6.5 or more, are 8-0 through the first 2 weeks of the season, and we haven't seen anything like that in a long, long time. So Amal says play the under in the Thursday night NFL game as his show best bet. Find all of his best bets over at DocSports.com on his handicappers homepage. I'm going to go with the Houston Texans this week. I like that number dropping down a little bit. And for all the reasons we mentioned earlier in the show, if you want to go back, folks, and check it out, you may do so. But I like CJ Stroud over Sam Darnold. That's not his shot against Darnold. He's playing fantastic football. Certainly the New York Jets fans hate him even more now than they did a couple of years ago. But I'll go with the Houston Texans and CJ Stroud. And you can find all my work again exclusively at DocSports.com. Any parting shots before we call it a wrap?
No, I just tell you one thing. If you're taking dogs, play the money line. Scott, you always talk about where the spread is. You and I talk about this, in terms of don't worry about it. Just to kind of reiterate that point this weekend, the point spread came into play in 2 games. The Bears-Houston was a push, and the Kansas City-Cincinnati game. The other 14 games, just pick the winner.
Yeah, and what Amal's referring to is, closing lines in the NFL the last 30 plus years have come into play about 5% of the time in the NFL, less than 2% of the time in college football. So, keep that in mind. If you see a number that's moved a half a point or a point, don't be scared, folks, to jump on that play anyway. Your intuition, your first time through of handicapping the game is normally right rather than wrong because of a small line move. He's Amal Shaw. I'm Scott Spreitzer. We are DocSports.com's Against the Spread with Spreitzer and Shaw. Best of luck this week, folks. Check out all the daily videos each and every day at DocSports.com YouTube page. And we'll be back here next week. As you know, you got to do it, man. Let's put them in the win column, everybody.